My name is Margaret Doyle. I am 74 years old, and 8 days ago, my daughter-in-law packed my life into 4 suitcases and told me it was just a trial. She called it Cedar Hollow. Sunridge Cedar Hollow, if you want the full corporate name they slapped on it after the buyout. What she didn't know, what she never bothered to ask, is that I built that building with my own 2 hands and my dead husband's life insurance check, back when the parking lot was still a gravel lot and the east wing was just a foundation and a promise. She thought she was putting an old woman out to pasture. She had no idea she was walking me back into my own house. Welcome back to Alpha Mom Stories. If you've ever been quietly erased by people who assumed you'd stopped counting, stay with me, because in 8 days, a man I trained 30 years ago looked at my face across a folding table and said 4 words that changed everything. But we'll get there. First, you need to understand who I was before I became, in my son's house, just grandma who needs looking after. I was a nurse. Not a hobby nurse, not a nurse who left the job the day she got a ring on her finger. I graduated in 1974, and I worked labor and delivery for 11 years before my first husband, Daniel, died in a highway accident on a Tuesday in March, leaving me 38 years old with a 9-year-old son and a life insurance check for $110,000. Everyone told me to be careful with that money. Put it in bonds. Let it sit. I bought a rundown boarding house instead, 6 bedrooms and a leaking roof, on a 2-acre lot outside of Marion, and I turned it into something the county had never seen before, a small, private home for elderly people who had nowhere gentle to land. I did the books myself at the kitchen table after Bradley went to bed. I hired my first 2 aides off word of mouth. I mopped floors in my nursing whites because I couldn't yet afford a janitor. I called it Cedar Hollow, after the row of cedar trees along the drive that I refused to cut down even when the contractor said they were in the way of expansion. By 1996, 10 years after I opened the doors, Cedar Hollow had 4 wings, 62 beds, and a waiting list 11 families long. I designed the east wing myself, wider doorways for wheelchairs, windows low enough that a woman in a bed could still see the garden, a nurse's station shaped like a horseshoe so no resident ever had to shout for help. I wore a small gold nurse's pin on my collar every day of those years. Daniel had given it to me the year I graduated. It says, in letters so small you need reading glasses to see them, curati ipsum, take care of yourself too. I thought it was a joke when he gave it to me. I understood it better with every year that passed. I sold Cedar Hollow in 2008, when I was 56 and my hands had started to shake too much some mornings to trust myself around medication carts. I sold it to a respectable regional healthcare group, kept a small consulting fee for 2 years to ease the transition, and then I let it go. Completely. I moved to Willowbrook, remarried a good, quiet man named Walter Reyes 3 years later, and I did not set foot on that property again for 18 years. Walter died 8 months ago. Congestive heart failure, in his sleep, in the bed beside me. I woke up next to him and he was already gone, and I have not, if I am honest with you, been entirely steady since. My son Bradley is 51 now. He works in commercial insurance and has never once, in his adult life, enjoyed conflict. He married Vanessa 14 years ago. Vanessa sells real estate, and she is very good at her job, which is to say she is very good at making other people feel that the decision has already been made and they are simply the last to be informed. I love my son. I want to say that clearly, before anything else. Bradley is not a cruel man. He is a man who has never once, in 51 years, chosen the harder conversation over the easier silence. That is its own kind of failure, and it is the failure this whole story turns on. 3 months after Walter died, I had a fall. A small one. I misjudged the last stair in my own front hallway, and I bruised my hip and cut my forehead badly enough to need 4 stitches. I was in the emergency room for 6 hours. I drove myself home from the pharmacy the next day. Vanessa was at my house within 48 hours of that fall, holding a folder. The folder had a name printed on the tab in Vanessa's handwriting, Mom, Transition Plan. She sat across from me at my own kitchen table, the same table, if you can believe it, where I once did Cedar Hollow's books by hand, and she opened that folder like she was presenting a listing. "We think it's time you had some support," she said. "Just temporary. A trial basis. 2 weeks, maybe 3, just so you can heal properly and we can all breathe easier." Bradley sat beside her and looked at his coffee cup the entire time. He did not look at me once. The facility she'd chosen was called Sunridge Cedar Hollow. I noticed the name and said nothing, because at 74, you learn there is value in letting people finish their sentence before you correct their arithmetic. "It's a wonderful place," Vanessa said. 5 stars. Beautiful gardens. I looked at 4 others and this one felt right. I asked her, gently, why we needed a transition planned folder for a 2-week trial stay. She said it was just to have everything organized in one place. Financial power of attorney forms, in case I needed help with paperwork while recovering. A form authorizing Sunridge Cedar Hollow to speak directly with her, not with me, about my care decisions. And near the back, tucked behind a tab labeled Simply Property, a preliminary real estate appraisal of my house. Dated 11 days before my fall. If you have ever watched someone start measuring your coffin before you've stopped needing your coffee, type "I see it" in the comments, and stay with me, because that appraisal was the first thread, and I was about to start pulling. I did not confront her that day. I said, "Let me think about it," and I watched something flicker across her face, not guilt, exactly. Impatience. The look of a woman who has already sold the house in her head and is annoyed the paperwork hasn't caught up. I said yes to the trial 3 days later. Not because I believed her. Because I wanted to be inside the building when I started asking questions, not locked outside my own son's front door. I have kept careful books my entire adult life. It is the one habit 50 years of nursing and business never let me drop. So before I signed anything, I read every page of that folder twice, in my reading glasses, at my own table, with my own pen in hand, not the pen Vanessa had already uncapped and placed in front of me. The durable power of attorney form had a signature on the last page. My signature. Dated 6 weeks earlier. I did not remember signing it. I want to be careful here, because I am not a woman who throws around accusations. So let me tell you exactly what I did instead of accusing anyone. I called my grandson, Caleb. He's 17, sharper than his father ever was at that age, and the only person in that family who still calls me just to talk, not to check a box. I asked him, casually, whether his mother had asked him to witness any papers for Grandma recently. There was a long pause on the line. "She asked me to initial something in May," he said. "She said it was for your insurance." I didn't really look at it. 6 weeks before the appraisal date was May. I asked Caleb to do one thing for me, and I want you to understand I did not enjoy asking a 17-year-old to do this. I asked him to take a photograph, quietly, of any paperwork he saw on his mother's desk with my name on it, the next time he was in the house. Not to steal anything. Just to look, and remember, and send me a picture. 3 days later, he sent me 4 photos, taken fast, slightly blurred, clearly snapped in a hurry between the hallway and his mother's home office. One was a real estate listing draft for my house, my actual address, with a target list price of $840,000 and a note in the margin, post-transition, need signed release. One was a spreadsheet. Vanessa's real estate brokerage, the independent one she and a partner had opened 2 years ago, was 11 weeks behind on a business loan. The monthly payment on that loan was $4,200. My house, sold quickly and quietly, would clear that loan in full with enough left over to reinvest, in Vanessa's handwriting, before Q3. I called my old friend Sandra Whitfield that same evening. Sandra is an elder law attorney, 71 years old herself, sharp as a tack, and she was the one who helped me draft the sale contract for Cedar Hollow back in 2008. She has known me for over 30 years. I read her the power of attorney language over the phone. I described the signature. "Margaret," she said, "I need you to get me a copy of that document before you sign anything else. And I need you to not fight about it at home. Just get me the copy. If you've ever had to quietly build a case inside your own family, because the people at your table had already decided the ending, type still gathering below, and stay with me, because I hadn't even walked through the doors of Cedar Hollow yet, and the story was already turning. I packed 4 suitcases myself. I did not let Vanessa help. I put my nurse's pin in the small zipper pocket of my carry-on, the same pin Daniel gave me 49 years ago, because some part of me, some old, stubborn, professional part of me, wanted it close when I walked back through those doors. I asked Sandra to have the requested copy of the power of attorney sent to her office, not to my house, so there would be no version of events where a piece of paper went missing before I could compare a signature. I did have one bad night before the drive. I sat on the edge of my bed at 11 at night and thought about simply calling Bradley and asking him, plainly, to make this stop. No lawyers, no photographs, just a mother asking her son to look her in the eye. I picked up the phone. I even dialed the first 6 digits. I put it down. Because I already knew, from 51 years of being his mother, that if I gave Bradley an easy way out of this conversation, he would take it, and nothing underneath it would ever be resolved. Some things cannot be solved with softness. Some things need to be solved with facts, laid out where everyone can see them, in a room too public for anyone to raise their voice. So I let Vanessa drive me to Sunridge Cedar Hollow on a Tuesday morning. I let her carry one of my suitcases, because it made her feel generous, and generosity, in my experience, makes people careless. I requested one specific thing when we arrived, a room in the East Wing. The intake coordinator looked briefly puzzled. The East Wing rooms are usually reserved for residents needing extra mobility support, but Vanessa, eager to seem accommodating in front of the staff, said, whatever makes her comfortable, and so I got exactly what I asked for. I knew that wing. I had drawn its doorways on graph paper at my kitchen table in 1995. I knew where the old boiler room used to be before it became a supply closet. I knew, walking down that hallway with my 4 suitcases, that I did not need a map. What I did not know, yet, was that the wing's current director did a personal walkthrough of every new resident's room on their first week, a habit he'd apparently kept for years. His name, according to the little brass plate outside the director's office, was Marco Delgado. I did not recognize the name at first. It had been 30 years, and names fade faster than faces. On my 4th day, I was sitting in the East Wing common room. In the chair by the window I remembered installing myself because the afternoon light there was good for reading, when a man in his late 40s stopped in the doorway and looked at me for a long moment. "Mrs. Doyle?" he said. I said yes, cautiously, because in a nursing home you learn quickly that everyone knows your name off a chart before you know theirs. "Margaret Doyle," he said again, slower this time, and something shifted in his face. "You founded this place." I asked him how he knew that. He walked me, slowly, because he could see I still favored my bruised hip, out to the main lobby, to a section of wall I hadn't yet had the chance to visit. There, under glass, was a small brass plaque I did not put there and did not know still existed, Cedar Hollow Manor, founded 1986 by Margaret Doyle, RN, dedicated to dignified care. They kept it through 2 ownership changes, Marco said. New management wanted to take it down in 2015. I was assistant director by then. I told them if that plaque came down, I was walking out the door with it. I asked him why it mattered so much to him. He told me he started at Cedar Hollow in 1994 as a 19-year-old orderly, fresh out of a group home, with no family listed on his intake paperwork and a juvenile record that had cost him 2 other jobs before I ever met him. He said I was the one who interviewed him personally, the one who looked past the record, the one who told him, and he quoted this back to me, word for word, after 30 years, "I don't care what you did at 17. I care what you do at 7 a.m. tomorrow." He said he never forgot that sentence. He said it was the reason he went back to school, got his administrator's license, and eventually came back to run the very wing he used to mop. "You gave me the only chance anyone gave me," Marco said. "And your daughter-in-law checked you in here like you were nobody." I told him, calmly, that I needed his help. Not as a favor. As a professional matter. Sandra Whitfield's copy of the power of attorney arrived at her office 2 days later. She drove out to compare it, in person, with 3 older documents that carried my genuine signature: my Cedar Hollow sale contract from 2008, my Social Security paperwork, and a hospital consent form from the night of my fall, signed under obvious duress with a shaking hand. The signature on the May power of attorney did not match any of them. It was close. It was close enough to fool a notary in a hurry. It was not close enough to fool a woman who has signed her own name several thousand times across 50 years. Sandra also discovered, through the county recorder's office, that a preliminary listing agreement for my house had already been drafted with a real estate firm, Vanessa's own firm, pending only my incapacity documentation, which the folder had apparently intended Sunridge Cedar Hollow's admitting physician to help provide, quietly, as part of my transition. I asked Vanessa and Bradley to meet me for what the facility calls a family care conference, a standard meeting, required for any resident whose stay might extend past 30 days, held in a small conference room off the main lobby with a folding table and a box of tissues nobody had touched yet. Marco arranged for the meeting to be moved to that particular room, the one with a clear view, through the interior window, of the brass plaque in the lobby. I wore my nurse's pin that day. I put on my reading glasses. I brought 1 folder, not 4 suitcases, 1 folder, with Sandra's documents inside it, and I set it on the table without opening it. Vanessa arrived first, brisk, already talking about next steps and long-term planning before she'd even taken her coat off. Bradley trailed in behind her, still not meeting my eyes. Marco came in with the admitting physician and, at my request, with Caleb, who I had asked to be there as a witness, a 17-year-old boy sitting very straight in a folding chair, looking, for the first time in this whole story, entirely sure of which side he was standing on. Before we discuss my care plan, I said, I'd like to discuss the paperwork. I opened the folder. I did not raise my voice. Tab 1, I said. A property appraisal on my home, dated 11 days before my fall. Vanessa, would you like to explain why my house was being appraised before I'd so much as bruised my hip? Silence. Long enough that the room noticed it. Tab 2, I said. A durable power of attorney bearing my signature, dated 6 weeks ago, witnessed by my grandson, who was told it concerned insurance paperwork. My attorney has compared this signature against 3 verified samples of my own hand. It does not match. Vanessa's face had gone very still. Bradley had gone very pale. Tab 3, I said, a spreadsheet showing your brokerage is 11 weeks behind on a business loan, $4,200 a month, and a listing draft on my home price to clear that loan by the 3rd quarter. That's not, Vanessa started. I'm not finished, I said, and I want you to know, I said it the way I used to say it to a resident's family who was arguing with me over a medication schedule at 2 in the morning, not cruel, just final. I built this facility, I said. I designed the wing you checked me into. There's a plaque in your lobby with my name on it, and the man running this floor started here as a 19-year-old boy I gave a second chance to when no one else would. You didn't do your research, Vanessa. You checked your mother-in-law into her own life's work and hoped she'd be too tired, or too old, or too grateful for the company, to notice what was in the folder. Marco spoke then, quietly, to the room. Mrs. Doyle's signature has been verified as inconsistent with historical samples by outside counsel. As the facility's administrator, I have a legal obligation to flag any suspected instrument of elder financial exploitation to the state ombudsman. I've already made that call. Bradley put his face in his hands. It was the first honest thing I'd seen him do in 8 days. Mom, he said, I didn't know about the appraisal date. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, I said, and I did. That's the part that frightens me more, Bradley. Not that you lied to me. That you simply didn't ask. Numbers don't lie. People do. That's what I told Sandra on the phone the night after the meeting, and she laughed, a tired laugh, and said I should embroider it on a pillow. Here's what happened in the weeks that followed, because a story like this isn't finished until you know what it cost, and who paid it. The forged power of attorney was voided by the state, on Sandra's petition, within 11 days. The real estate listing was withdrawn before it ever reached the public market. Vanessa's brokerage did not survive the quarter, the loan came due, the business partner pulled out rather than risk his own license over what the state was now formally reviewing as elder exploitation, and the firm closed its doors in September. Vanessa and Bradley separated 4 months later. I did not celebrate that. I want to be honest with you about that, because it would be easy to make this into a simple villain's ending, and it was not simple. Bradley has been in counseling since. He calls me now on Sundays, just to talk, the way Caleb always has, no folders, no forms, no appraisals tucked behind a tab labeled property. I did not press criminal charges. Sandra thought I should. I chose instead to have the forged document formally voided and documented, on the record, with the Ombudsman's office, so that if anyone in that family ever tried something like this again, to me, or to anyone else, there would be a paper trail as long and as careful as the one I kept on Cedar Hollow's books 40 years ago. I stayed at Sunridge Cedar Hollow for 6 more weeks after that meeting. Not because I needed to. Because Marco asked me, formally, if I would consider coming on as an unpaid advisor to the East Wing's Care Committee, and because I found, somewhat to my own surprise, that I still had something to give the place. I go back twice a month now, on my own schedule, in my own car. I sit in the chair by the window with the good afternoon light. Sometimes Marco walks a new hire past that chair and tells them who I am. I still wear the pin. Curati ipsum. Take care of yourself too. It took me 50 years and 1 very bad week to understand that sentence all the way through. If you've stayed with me this long, here's what I want you to carry with you when this video ends. Love your family. Help them when you can, and help them generously, because most people are not villains, they are frightened people who have convinced themselves that taking is a form of love. But do not let anyone confuse your usefulness with your worth, and do not let anyone move you anywhere, a house, a room, a folding chair at a folding table, without asking first what you built long before they arrived. I was moved into that building on a trial basis. It turns out I was never the one on trial. If this story meant something to you, tell me in the comments. I read every one, and subscribe to Alpha Mom Stories, because there is always another woman out there who needs to hear that it is never too late to open the folder yourself.